Hello. Did you know you were saints? Well, you may not feel like a saint, but we have a dear parishioner who's 103 years old, and he always would be sitting on that side, and one of the things he really said he liked about Mass was coming and looking at the face of the saints. And since we don't have iconography all over the church, he meant looking at the face of the congregation, the people. Now, you may not think of yourself as a saint. However, how many people actually want to be counted as a saint? Okay, good, yeah. When the saints go marching in, I want to be in that number. And of course, the thing is, we look at the saints. When I was growing up in the 50s and we had all the Butler's, lives of the saints, it was like they never did anything wrong. Everybody was ever angry, out of sorts. They're always perfect, praying all the time, and just full of the love of God. So like you say, are you a saint? Oh, no, maybe not, but I just do everything I can to please God. Do you do anything wrong? No, never, in which case, I think the reality is when you actually do look into the lives of the saints, they were not plaster, but they were real flesh and blood. They had some hard times. Look at a modern saint, Saint Teresa, Mother Teresa. There are times when she was actually a saint. Mother Teresa is going to a priest, not that she shouldn't go to a priest, but going to a priest for counseling. Why? Because she found sometimes that her faith was not even there, she felt. It wasn't even there. Now, of course, I guess she probably said something like, well, I can't let the other people know this. I'm a saint. They will be all just upset, Look, Mother Teresa's having a bad day, just like us, No saint, she's no saint. But the reality is, we try to do the works of God while we are still human beings. That's what makes a saint. And not that you're perfect. There was a time when Aloysius Gonzaga, who was one of the companions of St. Ignatius Loyola, actually said to him something like, it's a good thing you're a saint because otherwise nobody would put up with you. And that's because he could be difficult. Did you know that? Hey, anybody who used to be a warrior and now establishes the Jesuits has to have a strong personality. So I'm sure there were times where he rubbed people the wrong way or he was out of sorts. Why am I telling you this? It's because if we think of the saints as being other unearthly, then how can we possibly ever have any companionship with them since we ourselves are so human? And so I think when the end of our life comes, it won't be, why weren't you St. Paul? Why weren't you St. Peter? Why weren't you Jeremiah, one of the prophets? Because God already had one of those. I think what it'll simply say is, were you you? And did you do the best you could to try to show God's love, despite how difficult it can be sometimes? In the 8 a.m. Mass, I talked about St. John the 23rd, who was a bishop during the time of, he was Patriarch of Venice. During the time of the Second World War, he used the utility of the institutional church to crank out baptismal certificates for Jewish children so he could save them from the Holocaust. You would have thought that somebody might have said, oh no, I cannot do this. This is a certificate, it says this. I would be lying. Of course, that's a very terrible imitation of John the 23rd, but what he says, what can we do to save these children? He says, bring me the certificates, write down. And I say, Holy Father, but that's not true. It'll save lives. Get out of here. Don't worry about it. I can imagine something like that, okay? And good that he did it. So, as human beings, we are called to be holy. And what does holy mean? It means we imitate God's love, and there are times where we transcend our own selfishness. And I think that's what makes a saint. One of my favorite saints is Maximilian Kolbe, who in the concentration camp, when it came time for one of the guards to kill somebody because of some lesson they wanted to teach or some transgression he had, Maximilian said, it doesn't matter who we take me. It doesn't matter who you take me. This man has a family. And he simply stepped forward. Look at Damien of Molokai. Damien had a very hard time being a missionary, until he contracted leprosy. And then there was this complete integration into the community he was trying to serve. There is an unknown saint. He was in a concentration camp, and because he had some skills and some language skills and organizational background, instead of putting him to work for physical labor, they put him, in the refectory where, the officers were served. And he had the opportunity to, after everybody had eaten, to be able to scoop up a little bit of what was left. Some fruit, some bread, maybe a little bit of fish or meat, sometimes some tobacco. And he would hide it and then take it back to his barracks, and then he would distribute it. One of the men there, fellow inmate, said, "What's the catch?" He said, "What do you mean?" He says, "You're putting yourself at risk. Why are you doing this? If it was me, I'd keep it to myself. Not only are you putting yourself at risk, you're sharing it. It means less for you. What's going on?" Or words to that effect. And the person simply said, "I do this because I believe in God. I do this because I believe in God." I remember a time when and what happened is then that man who survived to the liberation of the camp then decided that he was going to look into this God thing, because in such a place that was so hell-like, here was a person who was bringing love and a completely altruistic action. And what he said to himself is, "I want to have what that man had. I want to have what that man had." Do you remember when you were little? Please say yes. Do you remember when you were little? When you're little, I once saw this sign in the doctor's office once. It was something like, it was like a child's litany, and it was something like, if it's a toy, it's mine. If it's on the floor and you pick it up, it's mine. If I was playing with it before and I'm not playing with it now, I'm playing with something else and you pick it up, it's mine. Children are very me, right? One time I almost lost my religion when I was at a parish and we were doing an Easter egg hunt on Easter Sunday. And I'd asked parents to make something like, I don't know, please take a dozen eggs and boil them and dye them, and we'll hide them in the grass, and the children can do it after the masses. Well, we had tons and tons of eggs. Anyway, what happened is we never had enough. Because what happened is there were like little kids that, you're going, "Look, here's the egg, and they're going. And what happened, the kids who were more agile, more able, faster, hey, an egg. If one egg is good, 50 is even better, and they were scooping them up. One little kid was crying so much, I couldn't find an egg, And it was really turning out to be a horror, because parents were going like, "Get in the car, stop crying, it's Easter Sunday, you got plenty of candy back home, you got eggs back home, you didn't find anything." And so one little kid was crying, this poor little toddler, and I said, "I'll be right back." And because the rectory was not far from the church, I went to the rectory. I had a thing of dyed Easter eggs on the rectory table. I picked them up, I took them with me, I put them on the ground next to the little kid's feet, and I said, "Look." And as I did that, a kid came swooping by and picked it up. I wanted to grab that kid and go, "Can you come here a minute, please?" I was just like, I don't believe this. I think we're just born selfish. I think that's the original sin. Not God, what do you want me to do for you, but, God, what can I get for myself? I think that's the original sin, selfishness. So if you're a little kid, by the way, you're probably wondering where this is going, If you were a little kid, you always want everything. And I remember when I was in the store and with my mom, and was like, "What about this?" "No, you don't need that." "What about this?" "We have one of those at home." "No, you have one of those at home. We don't need another one." "Well, And so what happened is one day there was somebody knocking at the door, and I looked, and my mother opened the door, and it was an elderly woman. And my mother was talking to her for a little bit, then she came back, and she got some money, gave it to the lady at the door, and then my mother had some tea towels and clothespins. And having been a bright kid, I said, "Why did you buy those?" I said, "We already have plenty of those. We don't need those." And I said that in all, I didn't give my mother a hard time. I really was a perfect child. But I remember, as I recall it, I remember saying, why did you get that? But we don't need those. Because I had inculcated the lesson of we don't need that. Therefore we're not going to get it because money can be tight. And what my mother said is, you're right. We don't need that. We didn't need to buy that. But she needed to sell it. We didn't need to buy that, but she needed to sell it. And so Mom found some change and purchased this from this woman, not because we needed it, but because she needed it. She needed it. And I have no idea what had happened in the life of that elderly woman who was reduced to going door to door. Of course, back then you did have door-to-door people, Fuller Brush person and people selling vacuum cleaners and Hoovers and only to get into that, you know that. You're old, you understand. But to me, after that, as I got older, I began to look back more and more and more on the very selfless things that my mother did, where she put her own needs in the background for us kids, for many people. And I said to myself, and still did, my mom's a saint. So I think that's the key. You don't have to be anything spectacular. You don't have to part the Red Sea, multiply the loaves and fishes. Just think about what other people need. And if you can meet it, meet it.